Hello and welcome to ICF LinkedIn Live. And today I have a very special guest, my colleague, Kristin Kelly, Director of Ethics for ICF, because today what we want to concentrate on is ICF's new Code of Ethics. I shouldn't say new. It's the revised Code of Ethics for ICF. Many of you may know that the code is reviewed every 3 years. And Kristin, let's just start with the process, because the process of the review is quite complex, and I think that maybe not everybody appreciates how much effort and thought goes into that process.
Absolutely. Thank you, Magda. It is a very robust and lengthy process. And actually, for the code that just launched on April 1st, we started the review process back in July of 2023. So it's been a long time coming. And what we changed the process slightly for this code review, where we started with a steering committee, and it comprised of our former chair of the last code review, who had put together the 2020 Code of Ethics, the chair of the independent review board that we have at ICF, and also the chair of the ethics advocacy team. So they came together and discussed and made a plan, and a lot of research went into that. And then it was a multi-phase process where we're gathering input from different people around the entire ICF system, a lot of surveys, lots of conversations with stakeholders across the organization, the boards, and a lot of really good feedback went into that. And then at that point, we created the code review team, and every person involved in all of these pieces of the code review, brilliant group of people who put a lot of time and energy and effort into this process, because they were meeting very frequently. It was weekly meetings for 6 months last
Wow.
year, where they were
Mhm.
putting together the code, having a lot of really deep conversations. And it was really set up nicely with all of the research that had been done by the steering committee in advance.
Mm.
And then the code review team was able to jump in from there. And even so, it's a lot of conversation, and it's a very important piece of work within the ICF, the code. So it's a lot of deep conversation and thought that goes into it. And then even once we hit the point where we were ready for the global board to review, we still had people behind the scenes who worked tirelessly ever since the code was approved in October to get it ready for the launch in April. So just a huge shout out to everyone involved in that process, because it's not for the faint of heart.
Absolutely, and yes, especially that we are in a volunteer appreciation month, so big appreciation to the code review. You said it, so why is it so important to have such a rigor in the review of the code?
Well, we review this, as you mentioned, we review it every 3 years. And it's something, uh, it's so important for the standards of the profession and for this
Right.
organization. And it really sets ICF coaches apart, having this code to be able to lean into with coaching. And they take it very, very seriously when we're reviewing this and looking into changes, looking at the last version of the code, wanting to see, okay, what's missing? What are we not
Mm.
touching on that's come up in the
Mhm.
last couple of years? Looking through it to see, what could be changed or reworded, or what's not effective, or what's something that we shouldn't
Mm.
have, and
Mhm.
really looking at that. But it's so important for the entire profession to have this, and so putting something in place that will serve the organization and all of our stakeholders for the next couple of years. Just to clarify too, we say 3 years, and 2020 was our last code of ethics that came out. We're in 2025. It's because of the length of the code
Mhm.
review.
Yeah.
We put a lot of time. We started 3 years after that 2020 code went into effect,
Right.
and here we are. So there's a lot of rigor that goes into it, and I think it's evident in the work that was produced.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that this is, I mean, the world around us is evolving so quickly that if we were not engaging in the review of the code, it would not be very relevant, right? This is the same as we do with the core coaching competencies. And oh, by the way, ethics is one of the competencies.
Mhm.
And I also think that this is important because we want to our code be reflective of our stakeholders.
Mhm.
So as we grow in more countries, in more cultures, of course now the technology and AI,
Yes.
there are so many aspects and facets of the profession that simply didn't, maybe they existed but they were not evident in
Right.
a practice of coaching, and they are now. So I think it is truly extremely important to have this document for our coaches, but also for the clients, right? We
Yes.
often, we always recommend to ICF coaches, members, and credentialed coaches to share the code with their clients and to proudly present it as the resource for the client as well.
Absolutely.
So what's new with this one? Because of course, I've been observing the evolution of the ICF Code of Ethics, and sometimes the review brings many changes, and sometimes it's more like, did they really change? So what's new and exciting this time?
Yeah, you're right. And actually, as part of this process, I was looking at all of the different versions of the ICF code over the years, and the evolution is fascinating. We should explore
Right.
that more, and just to see how much things have changed. With this particular code, the essence of the code remains largely the same. And so, when you said earlier, talking about a revised code, that's essentially what it is. It's not a brand new
Mhm.
code. A lot of it is the same as what was in the previous version. The structure, that's a big thing that's changed. We do have it's a little longer, you may notice, but we did add the values into the code
Right.
itself, which is a change over what
Mhm.
we've had previously, which I may make the document a little longer, but I do love that it brings the organizational values of the ICF front and center. So there are several pages in the code dedicated to that. We've restructured the code in a way where individuals, whether it's coaches or clients or anyone who's curious, can go in and maybe find the kind of standard they're looking for. So instead of having the structure, the different sections of the code that we had last time, they've been renamed, and then the standards have been reordered under those to make clearer sense. So, for instance, we have like the section one under the standards, it's agreements for client and or sponsor engagement. So any of our standards that have to do with that would fall under that space. So you will look at it, it may look a little confusing at first, but I think that once you start reading through and you'll understand why it was grouped the way it was, it makes it a lot easier to find what you may be looking for. You will notice that there have been several standards that were taken out of the code itself, but they weren't taken out entirely. They were moved to another section of the code, simply because they made better sense to be more aspirational. And we've moved
Mhm.
it into a new section of the code that was created, commitments for all within the ICF ecosystem, because the code's meant for everyone in the entire ICF system. So this is something where, standards that existed previously that were maybe hard to adjudicate through our ethical conduct review
Sure.
process, they were moved into the space. They're still important. There's still things that we want ICF professionals and anyone who abides by the code to be keeping top of mind and how they show up with one another,
Mhm.
but it wasn't something that we kept as a standard. And really, if you're looking through the code, only two standards are brand new. You mentioned AI earlier. That was certainly something that was not on our radar back in 2018 when we were working on the last
Yes.
version of the code. So we do have a new standard around artificial intelligence. And then there's another new standard that's around the roles of an ICF professional and just being very clear about when you're serving as a coach versus a therapist or anything else. If you have other sorts of modalities that you're trained in, I'm just being very clear about the role of the coach. So those are the two newest standards. We do have a resource on the website that I would
Mhm.
encourage everyone to check out, and it's an overview of what the changes to the code were. And it just brings it front and center so you can better understand what we changed. And my favorite piece of that document is actually in the standards themselves. So you could look through at the different standards in the code and you can see where it was in the 2020 code. So if you're really familiar with the last version of the ICF code, it will give you some clarity on how those were combined or changed in that way. So those were the big things. It was really structure, and shifting. We do have a little different setup with the definitions that are in the code. There's more, so that does add a little bit to
Right.
the length as
Right.
well. But we do have a section specifically for terms that are used in the code itself. And the beautiful thing, it links you directly back to the standard that it correlates with. And then there's other terms that we've included as well that are used within the ICF system to help, just give additional context and clarity. But really, the essence is the same. And so I think I just love how comprehensive it is and how it really pulls everything together.
Yeah, most definitely. And that document you mentioned, that's really so important because, to your point, because the structure is different, people may look into new code and be a little bit scared, right? Everything changed. It looks completely like a different document, while in fact it is not. You mentioned the two new standards and also the maybe more logical structure
Mhm.
of the code itself, and the explanations as well. There is another resource that we offer, right? Could you talk about the statements?
Yes, absolutely. So this was actually something new with the last version of the code,
That's
and it
right.
was so successful. People really leaned into it, and we called them the insights and considerations for ethics. And they're essentially interpretive statements, and they're created by. We had a huge group of people working on that, from the code review team and our independent review board, who worked for 6 months after the code was approved by the board to make sure they had these statements ready for when the code launched in April. And it really just helps create more understanding. It gives the reader an opportunity to go in and just better understand what each of the standards is about. Because a standard in the code, sentence or two, it's not a lot of you can't put a lot of detail into that space. And so
Of course.
this resource is really a deep dive into helping people understand how they can apply it individually as a coach, as just to better understand all of the different standards, because you're right, it can be very overwhelming to see that, but it is really helpful, and it's really exciting because it's a PDF on our website, and we are
Mhm.
working on having translations made of that as well. We do have translations of the code, and you will see more and more languages added over the coming weeks and months, but we're excited about that resource.
Yeah, I love that particular document because as we often receive calls, right, either
Mhm.
from clients or from coaches, and they ask, would that be a breach? And our standard response is, it depends, right? Because it
Yeah,
does, because it
yeah.
depends on the context, on specifics of
Mhm.
details. So being more understanding more uh, what the breach may look like or what not being in breach may look
Yeah.
like, I think is tremendously useful to the coaches
Yes.
themselves. And that resource, I am glad to hear that it's going to be also available in multiple languages,
Mhm.
because I think that brings the code to life.
It
That's
does.
for sure. Yeah.
Mm.
So the question that we always get is, what does the changes to the code mean for, especially for the exam? So question that we see right now, how will these changes affect credentialing exam after April 1st?
That's
So
a great that's a great question. And from our ethics assist line, that is the number one question we've been receiving
good.
for the last couple of weeks as well. And really the answer for now, there aren't changes that are happening right now. So with the ACC exam, there are some items that will be updated, but that won't happen for at least a year. And we've
That's right.
confirmed that with our credentials and standards team just to ensure. So if you have a credentialing exam, ACC exam scheduled in the next couple of months, you're fine to continue moving. And I think honestly, with the essence of the code remaining the same, reviewing either version of the code will be sufficient enough for you in that exam. Now, after next year, the start of next year, 2026, there will be changes coming, but you'll have plenty of advance notice on when that will take place. So I think we'll be in a good place with that. I do
Yeah.
think with the credentialing exam, it's a little different because there aren't specific scenarios pulled from the code itself, is my understanding. So I don't
Right.
anticipate major changes to that exam at all. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, but this is important to remember, that whenever we do the update to any of our main products, such as a code or core
Mhm.
competencies, we allow ample time
Yes.
for those changes to be absorbed,
Mhm.
and to your point, even those statements, so that there is a deeper understanding about the
Yes.
code
Yes.
itself. Um, so that allowance of time, if you will apply also to our coaching education providers and anybody else who is using the code for their own purposes.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes.
and of course, the code and the resources that Kristin already mentioned are available online on our new website. So
Yeah.
if you didn't have a chance to look into a new ICF websites, please do, because it's really quite exciting itself. Any other questions that you received about the code in your team?
I think one thing I'd like to point out, one resource we don't have ready yet, but will be coming soon, is the updated ICF Ethics course that we keep on the ICF website. And this is a complimentary course that we offer free of charge to anyone. And it fulfills the requirement for the ethics CCEUs that are needed to renew your credential. So that we're active. We have a team very actively working on this right now, and I'm really excited. They're going a different direction than what we've seen previously, and I think people will really enjoy it. So once that's ready, we're aiming for June of this year. It'll replace what's currently on the website. But for now, if you are planning on taking the ethics course on the website, don't fear. We have the previous version still available, and you can still take that as well. But that is something important that's coming.
Yeah, there was another question just popped up about the changes to the core competencies. So you may also know, our listeners may know that ICF is right now working on the update to our core coaching competencies. Again, a best practice for our organization issuing credentials to individuals that every 3 to 5 years, the job analysis should be conducted to review the competencies. So since we are in the midst of that process, whatever changes to competencies because of the changed code of ethics would be rolled into this overarching review of the competencies. So again, ample time to make changes and to inform everybody, especially those being on the education side and those preparing for their credentialing journey or in the middle of their credentialing journey. So, since this is such a lengthy process, Kristin, it's almost time to start creating new steering committee, right?
Yeah, we joke about that all the time. Yes. And that's why it's nice to think, okay, because we were talking about it at the end of the last process. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
so 2028 will be the next time we come together, but it'll be here before you know it. And I would encourage people, get involved with the code. And if you have questions about it, we have an ethics assist line at ICF. There's a telephone number. It's my direct line at ICF, FYI. And we have an email address as well. And so you can contact us with any questions you have about the code, or if you're interested in volunteering in some way. Of course, we have a couple of more years till we need that steering committee and code review team in place. But keep it on the horizon, because there's, I know that as beautiful as this code is right now, there will be changes that will need to happen, or at least to be considered and discussed in 3 years. Because think about artificial intelligence stuff, like
Right.
how much has changed, even just in the writing of the code to now. So I'm curious to see where that goes.
That's so
Um,
true.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, it'll be here before we know it.
Great. I know that another question that we often get, and I think it's true for the code as well, is how many languages do we have it available now?
That's a great question. So we launched on April 1st with French, German, Spanish, and Portuguese. We have several other languages in the hopper with our chapters. We work closely with our chapters around the world. So huge thank you to those who have already been working intently on this. And for those who are curious about it, send me a message, because we can get that ball rolling, so we can make sure we have offered as many languages as we're able to. So we have, I think there's 3 or 4 languages that we're getting ready to be able to post onto the website. I don't want to quote those, so I don't I don't leave
Yes.
anyone
Yeah.
out. Yeah, but we so right now we started with 4, 5
Mhm.
counting English, but we are open to as many other. We're in lots of conversations. Myself and my colleague Alyssa on the ethics team have been speaking with chapters around the world to make sure we're covering as many languages as possible.
That's great. And the question came from Meryl Moritz. Hi, Meryl. And she mentions a very important group of stakeholders and our mentors as they work with the individuals in their credentialing journey. Of course, it is very important for the mentors to have access
Absolutely.
to the document itself and all other resources that are available.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So, you mentioned, of course, invited people to volunteer. What are other opportunities, if you will, in a greater scheme of ethics within ICF that people could really join in?
Yeah, there's a lot of really good space, I think, for people to get involved and just to test the waters and see if there's a way to volunteer in some way. But we have the ethics water cooler is a monthly conversation that takes place. It's very informal, and you can bring different ethical questions or concerns you may have to a non recorded space on Zoom where conversation can happen freely. We have, of course, have the ethics communities of practice, and we have a wonderful group of volunteers involved in that. And if you're interested in leading that, let us know and we can connect you with the right people on the ICF team. There's the independent review board, and they don't have openings currently, but if they do, we do post it onto the coachingfederation.org website. We also have an ethics advocacy team, and they're not accepting any applications at this present moment either, but there are periods of time where that could be a possibility. And with the water cooler, we do have an English version and a German. And I know there's been interest out there in wanting to look at offering a water similar kind of conversation in other languages. So if that's something you'd be interested in, I'd love to hear from you so we can get that moving too.
That is great, and especially the water cooler. It's so popular. It is quite a popular conversation, and I think that indicates two things, at least two things. One, that more people are interested in ethics, which I think is fantastic because this is such an important pillar of the credibility of the coaching profession and ICF itself. But I think also that people do not think of ethics as boring any longer. It's more like, this is fascinating.
Right.
How can we capture the essence of what we need to do, how we need to show up as coaches with our clients and otherwise in order to maintain the ethical standards for
Yes.
the profession. So I think that's actually fantastic that we see an continuing to increase interest in everything ethics within ICF.
I completely
Well,
agree. Thank you, Magda.
yeah, absolutely. I want to thank you because Kristin led our staff team supporting the entire review process. So she's just breathing a little bit lighter these days since it's already done and launched. Um, any parting comments, Kristin, to everybody who's listening to us?
I just thank you for your interest in ICF ethics and the code of ethics. I think that it's, as Magda said, it's a pillar and it's so important. And the more attention we can pour into it, the better. And I think it makes everyone it raises all of our boats if we're able to have these conversations and bring it to life. So I'm just thankful that people are interested in wanting to come together and talk about it and learn more. And if you have any questions about the code of ethics or any of the ICF ethics resources, reach out to the Ethics Assist line. We're happy to help. I think only one other resource I did want to mention that correlates to the new code is our video series. And
That's
this was highly popular with our last code of ethics. And we partnered with the same videographer who created the series with us and featured members of our code review team. So I would encourage you to have a look at those if you haven't already. It's just another way to hear from the people who were behind the review and to really go a little deeper into the sections and understand, some of the changes that were made and the conversations that were had. So just thank you. And I'm really honored to be here. Thanks for having me, Magda.
absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you, everybody who joined us today. And until we talk again, bye.